Welcome to another stimulating edition of Red Meat. I'm Jim Geraghty along with Mark Hemingway. And we come to you this afternoon with shocking news that Senator Judd Gregg is going to remain Senator Judd Gregg. He's not going to be Commerce Secretary Judd Gregg. Apparently, according to his statement, differences on the Census Bureau management and over the stimulus itself are two reasons he's decided that he just cannot work in the cabinet of Barack Obama. Apparently, Commerce Secretary is the new drummer for Spinal Tap position of the Obama administration, that they keep putting people in there and they spontaneously combust or something.
Right.
I mean, my first thought when we got this rather shocking news late today was that obviously Judd Gregg had made a terrible error and paid all of his taxes, making him incapable of serving in the Obama administration. Mark, your jaw was on the floor when I told you a few moments ago. What's your...
Yeah, well, I mean, well, first off, I can say is that I'm glad it appears that Gregg has resigned because of his integrity rather than in spite of his lack thereof. Or am I even making sense right now? But yeah, no, certainly that it's interesting to see that I was kind of shocked when I heard the census news initially, because I was like, wow, I mean, this should be a really big story. In the midst of the whole census news, it sort of got buried there, and I mean, it's a big story on two levels. One is, first of all, imagine the left-wing hand-wringing if George Bush had announced that Karl Rove was going to oversee the census in the West Wing. I mean, the political impact of the census is very important. Mm-hmm. And the second reason is that there's some serious constitutional questions about whether or not you can do that. Mm-hmm. And people hadn't really been paying attention, and I'm sure they will now.
Well, from the very beginning, the idea of Judd Gregg, look, as one of those rare remaining Northeastern Republicans, was in a position of great influence. He's clearly not one of the more rock-ribbed, die-hard, down-the-line conservative members of the Senate. And in a place where, the Republican filibuster is hanging by a thread, the kingmakers are the folks in the middle. The kingmakers are the folks who are the deciding votes there. And he was going to, and if he was going to do it in exchange for, let's say, state, defense, treasury, one of the glamour positions, commerce. Don Evans was at Commerce. William Daley was at Commerce. No offense to those fine, but come on. I have friends who work in the Commerce Department. They don't do anything.
Do you even know the name of the Bush's last Commerce Secretary?
You're stumping.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It's Carlos Gutierrez.
Oh, there you go. All right,
but,
yes.
I'm not trying to do this to prove your ignorance. I'm just saying that this is. Those of us that are professionals about this have to think about these things.
Generally not considered one of the glamour positions of a cabinet.
No.
So that first move was kind of surprising. And then perhaps, as you said, census would be one of the few positions that really would have a decisive and far-reaching policy influence. And Rahm Emanuel was kind of snatching it away from him and saying, no, we're going to run it over here in the White House.
Well, I think it wasn't just that. I mean, there was a lot of left-wing interest groups that had a big interest in the census. They were insisting that somehow that because Republicans had controlled the census in 1990 and other factors, that Democratic votes had been dramatically undercounted. And so you could tell that there was a movement afoot to try and use the census politically. So.
Yeah. They wish to use statistical sampling to represent this very oppressed minority group of non-existent Americans.
Oh, wow.
The non-existent American community has been undercounted in the census year after year.
Not in Chicago.
Well, no, they vote, but they aren't necessarily counted in the census.
Sorry.
And that's, an injustice that the Obama administration is going to get right on to deal with. Surprising, my guess is one of the ways that would have a ramification is for doling out federal funding. And when you think of federal funding, nothing says that like the stimulus, of which passage is near assured. Apparently, Kennedy will not be there for the final vote, which puts them from 61 votes down to 60. Mm-hmm. Snow, Collins, and Specter all apparently indicated they were nervous about being the deciding votes. But guess what, folks? It's on you. It's there's no longer any room to hide there. This thing is going to pass, though. I mean, there's really no expectation of this getting
I don't
derailed.
think there's any expectation of this getting derailed. That said, though, I mean, the Gregg thing certainly changes the calculus of this, quite a bit. There could be a lot of pressure. I mean, I think certainly Snow and Collins they are who they are. They're the dying breed of a strain of certain Rockefeller Republicans in the Northeast, and that's fine. They can having them as Republicans in Maine is better than having Democratic senators, I guess. But Specter is a different story. I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on him. I think he would like to be elected again. But he faced serious challenge in Toomey. Already a couple of big conservative contenders have lined up to challenge him in the primary. So he could be thinking real close, especially if the dynamic in the Senate were to suddenly change such that he ended up casting the 60th vote.
We don't have crystal balls, but clearly by 2010, late 2010, we're going to have some sense. The American people have decided by then whether they think the stimulus worked or whether it didn't. And I kind of go back and forth. There's a part of me earlier on was saying, look, there's no way this works. This is, you're throwing this much money to golf cart development in North Dakota and $600 million for digital TV coupons and all the other junk in the bill that I just don't see, unless you subscribe to the theory that any amount of money spent anywhere counts as economic stimulus.
Yeah.
That this was not going to, a lot of people, if you're one of these interest groups, you'd be very happy with the stimulus. But that otherwise, I just didn't see it being this economic jolt that everybody was looking for.
Yeah.
But I'm beginning to wonder, will there be a perception that this has turned things around? I mean, will cheerleading from the bully pulpit of the White House convince Americans that things are going to get better?
Well, where we're at now, certainly, that could happen. I mean, the recession could be primed to turn around on its own, in 6 months, and we would never know whether it was according to the stimulus or not. The question is if that works out, then yes, they can claim credit. The downside is if it doesn't work out, and the summer of 2010, the economy is still in the tank, then Obama is in the position of arguing, oh, well, it would have been so much worse if we, hadn't passed the stimulus, which is not an argument I think voters are going to buy. But I think the big problem here for the Democrats is yes, you can look forward to the 2010 and possibly the 2012 elections. But, when you're talking about medium, long-term consequences of this, I don't see anyone laying out, how this is going to affect not just the economic landscape, but the political landscape. I mean, if this plunges America deeply into debt, even if it does overcome a short-term recession, the debt burden might be such that it causes huge problems for unfunded entitlement programs and other things that could really put the Democrats in a pickle for a long time to come.
Yeah. Now, the thing that has me nervous, yes, I was saying in an interview earlier this week, with each passing day, I feel a little bit better about the future of the Republican Party, that they're going to, rebound sooner or later. It could be 4 years, could be 2 years, could be 6 years. I'm a little more nervous about the future of the country. And one of the ways I just kind of think about it is, you look at what most people, the consensus of what got us into this. Well, big housing bubble, subprime lending, and then turning into these derivatives, and banks are all of a sudden investing into it. Banks are leveraged, 30-to-1 ratios and all that stuff. Geithner is attempting to address that with his plan that apparently fits on a 3x5 index card. It was this unbelievably brief, 2 nouns and an adjective, apparently, was all the details they could get out of him. I'm not sure those fundamental issues have been addressed. So I don't know how much, you can distribute all the digital TV coupons you want, and the little habitat protection item in Pelosi's district. There's all kinds of things they can do, but I'm not sure that's necessarily going to address the cause of the issue. But the point is, if you got laid off by Circuit City, nothing in this stimulus bill is going to bring back your job.
No. Well, no, and Circuit City is actually a really good example of what's going on here, because Circuit City and a lot of other chains are going out of business, not necessarily because, I'm certainly competition and the fact that businesses weren't run well were part of it, but it was also, in Circuit City's case, largely because they were bought out by private equity on Wall Street, and these private equity firms thought they could run these retail chains better than people that, have experience in retail. And sure enough, Circuit City's going out of business. So, you're right. We're not addressing necessarily the root causes on Wall Street. The problem here is and I think you're right. This is the underlying root cause, which is that the banking system must be preserved at, all costs. And, what's going on right now, we don't know what they're doing to rescue the banking system. Bloomberg is suing the Federal Reserve to release, documents. This is nuts. So, there needs to be a focus put on Geithner so he explains himself a lot better than he has. And I think the market registered their discontent with how he presented the things.
Clearly, going down a couple hundred points with Geithner. It's one of those things where maybe he doesn't need to get into details because he was, as we were told, the only man who could save the American economy, and that we had to overlook this. The only other good news is that maybe with the next second plan for an economic stimulus or for fixing all these things is to go into the Geithner tax plan, in which we just kind of forget to pay a good portion of our taxes, and we can use that money to stimulate the economy. So, anyway, we hope you found this stimulating, because we certainly are just kind of muddling through the economic mess as it progresses through Capitol Hill. I am Jim Geraghty, along with Mark Hemingway. This has been another edition of Red Meat. Thanks very much for watching.